It is November the 2nd, 2021. Welcome everybody, I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist.org. And you can call in at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. Don't hide away from anybody. I hope everybody's doing good, if that's possible. Except for the demons, of course. The International Atomic Energy Agency are not who they claim to be. I always wanted a goat tree. Pretty trees, eh? So, United Nations is day 3 of the Conference of Parties, the 26th edition. And George Bush Sr. called United Nations the New World Order back in the day.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
That's calling United Nations the New World Order. Now, International Atomic Energy Agency acknowledges that happened, but they won't mention it again after. So this is one of the many models of radioactive fallout, a continuous plume, no breaks, covering the entire planet, still hemorrhaging out. So before we jump into the recent die-offs, we have lots of them, from insects to mammals, the animals, the birds. Let's show you some of Mother Nature's finer moments, because you might never take these pictures again soon. That's an interesting picture, isn't it? A snail hitching a ride on a turtle. This is a sperm whale sleeping. That's really spectacular. And I have thousands and thousands of hours as a diver. I've never seen that. That'd be amazing. This is a wild elephant. Sick of it. Sick of getting his picture taken. These are, of course, speaks for themselves, tigers, excuse me. And this picture is an amazing picture, really. You got a child with no arms and no legs, and his father making him smile. You can see bad weather on the horizon. And so, if you complain about stoplights in your cities, imagine these people. And look at the work and the dress. She's obviously living in a slum, but still dressed up as a fairy tale. Amazing. And so that rope there is extremely heavy, by the way. And so they're exhilarated to be where they are. And these two women get their picture taken. Mother Nature is really something, isn't it? And it's cruel, but it's all the way up the food chain. That's how it works. And just a few more of them before we jump right into the show. It's one of my all-time favorite pictures right there. And a bear taking a nap on an iceberg. That's brilliant, isn't it? Okay, so now for the nasty stuff. Bipartisan legislators demand an answer from Dr. Jekyll on alleged puppy experiments. So what they had done was they had 44 beagle dogs. According to the documents obtained via Freedom of Information Act, requests by taxpayer watchdog group the White Coat Waste Project, NIAID spent $1.68 million in taxpayer funds on drug tests, $1.7 million on 44 beagle dogs. Report claims that the researchers locked the dogs in cages with hungry sandflies so that the insects could eat them alive. Dr. Anthony Fauci is facing calls from a bipartisan group of legislators in response to the allegations that his National Institute of Health divisions locked 44 beagle puppies, not dogs, but puppies, in cages so insects could eat them alive in the name of science. And so science is the strangest creature in history, yeah? So this was the map that they showed you. See the title to the map over there. Take hope this Fukushima disaster map is fake. And what the nuclear industry done was proliferated that map out there of the tsunami from NOAA when this was NOAA's radiation dispersal map. And it was several years later before this one finally showed up. But the oceans were covered within 2 weeks. This is the 31st of March. So this is 20 days later. The whole planet is buried in radioactive fallout. And then the ocean, the stuff that goes in the ocean gets mixed up. It is hemorrhaging into the ocean, by the way. And just to give you some context, because we got so much to get through tonight. 2,000 kilometers from Fukushima, the ocean floor is covered in radioactive fallout. But it was all covered in radioactive fallout from the surface to the ocean floor, right? Cesium remains dispersed throughout the water column from the surface to the ocean floor and to the upper and lower tropospheres. And that radioactive sea spray has been shown to blow hundreds of kilometers inland, and that it goes into the communities and people get an exceptional dose. New York Times: ocean life faces a mass extinction. We may be on the precipice of a major extinction event in the marine wildlife. 2015. This is before the Paris Accord. You won't hear any connotations of climate change or vessel strikes or anything else. So what we done a couple of years before that was we had launched research expeditions because of the news that was coming out. So this is Vancouver all the way to British Columbia. I'll just give you a quick run through. Year after year after year, I went and done research expeditions for the whole coastline. But we've done this because there was strong evidence to indicate that the Pacific Ocean was facing an extinction event, and we wanted to go document it. But that takes a very long time, an enormous amount of money and equipment.
Oh, we got the big one up.
And energy. And so there's 27,000 islands up there. When I say we, I mean me and the people that supported me, of course. Now, you can fill the beach up with people, but what you're going to discover is that Fukushima nuclear fallout wiped out all the species to your left. That's before and after pictures. I went and took them myself and went back year after year on the research expeditions. This is just so you know who I am. And the radioactive fallout, there's many, many models of different isotopes. This one's of Neptunium-239 covering the whole planet. And that when you inhale it, or insects, or mammals, or animals, or marine life, the radiation exposure is increased by factors of 1 trillion because it's pulsing energy every second. And so what you see to your left, you'll never take those pictures again. They have now been wiped out. So birds, if they were hungry, could normally land on the coastline at low tide or dive down, and there's all kinds of food to feed upon. But what we discovered was all the species to your left, these are before and after authentic pictures, were missing. We're almost to Egg Island up there. Seas are definitely building. I was trying to make it to shelter before the afternoon. But a long story, we'll just keep going because we've got a lot to get through. So the species to your left are now extinct due to the radiation. What's really amazing and frightening is that universities, academics, media all refuse to acknowledge that this happened. They all refuse to acknowledge also that those species existed. And they vehemently and viciously will attack anybody who says that they existed, that they were actually real. So you tell me that's not the strangest scenario imaginable. Now, when I've done the expeditions, I've done them year after year, sometimes multiple times a year, for 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean without coming home, in desperation, looking for an oasis like this. And I did not find it.
Hey Zoe, a little too rough out there.
And so, year after year, doing these species counts with no breaks, year after year after year. We're on the East Coast currently. And so last year, this was expeditions. And what we discovered was there was no fish jumping. There was no birds flying. Most of the species, there was no birds visit my campsite a single time. And there was no spiders. The spiders bioconcentrate silver as radioactive silver 1,000 times the level that's seen in the soil. As I showed you, there was huge fallout. But it was amazing that we weren't finding any species. So there was nothing to record, no fish jumping, etc., etc. Last winter, we never found no birds last winter in the wintertime.
Ooh.
And that now,
She's running rich because
quiet beyond imagination.
just another day in hell.
And so this year, we went this route. And with the same thing where we're not finding any species whatsoever. In fact, the ants were missing, birds were missing. It was very difficult to find bees or wasps. I think we found a total of 30 this summer. And in a 450 kilometer range away from base station, we still didn't find the species. And so we've been at this for many years now, for almost a decade, since Fukushima nuclear meltdown. And that's this year's pictures. I'll just shoot through these pictures for you. And we'll jump into the headlines. I'm just trying to set the stage. These are difficult stories, very difficult for people to wrap their mind around without the the basic information of the whole research expedition itself, right? So this is this year, blah, 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 blah. And we only found 5 species of saltwater birds. We only found 5 species of saltwater birds. This was the last trip right there, those pictures of the year. I was taking everything apart there and packing it away. Okay, so just a few headlines for a precursor to the rest of the show. Mysterious mass deaths of Alaska birds baffle scientists. No such thing as climate change in those, but climate change now is every story. Even if your car is broken down on the road, it must be climate change. We know they're starving, their stomachs are empty. And the biologists who examine the birds, they all appeared emaciated. This is the same thing we're seeing with dolphins. And they're claiming that the dolphin was found with a 2-foot... Now, dolphins are typically like 7 feet. So they're claiming that the dolphin ate that, which is 2 feet long. That the dolphin is so stupid, or it might have, if the only way it could have ate it, because you got to swallow it whole, you can't chew it up, right? The only way they could have ate it is they can't. So somebody stuffed that down its throat after it washed up on the beach. This must have been washed up on the beach too. And then the media, the vicious, despicable media, took advantage of it. Second stranded dolphin be found in the area with a belly full of garbage in a month. With a belly full of garbage. The dolphin was found emaciated. Now, when you follow these stories all the time, what you realize is that they weren't not emaciated because of foreign objects. They're emaciated from a lack of food, lack of nutrition. And you can't eat something like this. This was actually stuffed down their throats of somebody. Okay, so whales won't stop killing themselves in New Zealand. This is 2018. 51 pilot whales had died in a mass stranding. So pilot whales, people are like, oh, Dana, they always mass strand. But no, they don't actually. They have in the past, but not like we're seeing since Fukushima nuclear meltdown. This is extraordinary. Let me break it down for you real quick. Whales won't stop killing themselves. You're talking about strandings that cost the entire breadth of New Zealand in a short period of time. There was 400 whales beached themselves, 200 whales beached themselves, 600 whales had beached themselves. And right now, and last year, there was 6,000 gray whales had died. The majority of these were confirmed to be emaciated. This is unprecedented numbers we're talking about. So now you get up to the current times. And so it's not just pilot whales, right? Sperm whales, 10 sperm whales, these were all emaciated, had washed up on the beaches at the one time in the United Kingdom. You had a minke whale, unusual mortality event, a gray whale, unusual mortality event, a humpback whale, unusual mortality event, a North Atlantic right whale, unusual mortality events. You had Alaska krill and mussels were listed to an unusual mortality events. And the matriarchs of a well-known orca family is starving to death, BC researchers fear. Now, a lot of these killer whales are emaciated, but they're emaciated because they got so much radiation they can't uptake nutrition. And a study this year showed there was actually lots of food, per se, and this was being blamed, the die-offs were being blamed on a lack of food, but they don't lack summer praise, according to a recent research. So they got so much radiation, they got leukemia. They can't uptake nutrition no more, which was predicted to happen in 2013, by the way. Alaska seabird die-off continues for another summer. That was 2018. It was over 1 million of them, emaciated and starving to death. Common murres. They can dive 600 feet all day long for anchovies and sardines and squid and krill and herring, etc., etc., right? And so then, but you seen bizarre media trying to blame it on, so we haven't been noticing any salmon up here, so we're noticing that the bears are getting skinnier and skinnier and getting more aggressive. Actually, grizzly bears emaciated, but the diet of the grizzly, they're trying to blame lack of salmon on the grizzly bears. But grizzly bears mostly eat roots and grubs and berries and grass. 95% of their diet. And in 2014, they started a contest, a glimpse inside Fat Bear Week. That's a fat bear, but you can get a fat bear from thyroid disorder, radiation, or from brain damage from radiation will also cause obesity. And Japan's rate of obesity has doubled in just a couple of years after nuclear meltdown. The 25-year-old winner stands at 1,000 pounds and took home the title for the fourth time since the start of the competition in 2014, which could easily be attributed, of course, to radiation brain damage. So you had mass mortalities of all species, not just pilot whales. This is unprecedented. And pilot whales have happened in the past, but not constantly, not everywhere. This year we had 15 up we're on to. The media didn't report on it. But if one had got wrapped up in a lobster pot, everything on the planet would have showed up. And where have all the insects gone? That's the question you're starting to see a lot of people ask. And now, of course, everybody has to regurgitate the words climate change. Particularly the Weather Channel, the biggest abuser of that term on the planet. Rare appearance of a beluga whale in Puget Sound. So this is the first time in it's 2,400 kilometers away from home. It's an Arctic beluga. Thousands of miles is right. And the good news, he said, is it didn't look like it was weak from sickness or lack of food. As if a whale being out of its in a different environment still couldn't find food or something. Which a couple of days later, there was the headlines, and I put links below to it, that the whale is emaciated. And for some reason I didn't save the story because it must have ended up in one of my daily shows folders. I didn't transfer it accidentally because they both go into the same. A drone spots a huge whale gliding off Quebec, which is up the interior. It's here on the east coast too, right? I'm not very far from Quebec. But that whale is emaciated. That's a very, very skinny whale. That looks like a fin whale, but you can't really tell. But he's definitely skinny. And the weather network is terrible. So last couple of days we've had, this was October the 30th. This is 4 days ago. Today's November the 2nd. Tragedy on the shores of Cape Beaches is thousands of fur seals washed up dead. They're completely emaciated. 100% emaciated. Unbelievable looking, eh? 100% emaciated. Staggering. Thousands of dead fur seals been washing up on the Cape Beaches. Nothing's confirmed, though, in the cause of it, they said. Reports thousands of fur seals. It has left many advocates confused. It is definitely that there is a cause that is more sinister than it is just being a natural phenomenon. West Coast's favorite beaches are now sadly covered in dead seals. So they're trying, some of the media turns to these organizations that were created since Fukushima. They're going to try to blame it on strong winds. Strong winds. Seals are in their environment. That is their environment. It's never going to be perfect all year long in that environment. They're genetic superior and selected for that environment. And so strong easterly winds is like, since Fukushima it might be normal, but it's not normal. And then they also taught there's also what they call an avian flu outbreak, where there's 12,000 cormorants have died. But there's other species that have died also. But the biggest population to die off was the cormorants. And they're group feeders. They feed in groups typically, not always, but mostly they live in big colonies with other species. They live side by side with seagulls and puffins too. Overnight, and we'll get to that coming, hundreds of malnourished Cape Fur seals washed up dead on South Africa's shores. And so I'm very suspect on the cormorants being an avian flu, because they're in the same spot as these seals. They eat the same food. By the way, the cormorants are emaciated too. All these are dead seals. Carcasses had signs of malnourishment, undernourishment, malnourishment. Carcasses, the seals were emaciated and had starved to death, in other words. Due to the scale of the event, the department is monitoring the situation with conservation management agencies, NGOs, academic institutes, and private citizens. And in some incidences, weaned pups are not strong enough to feed by themselves and will not survive. Well, normally, like, you remember the pictures I showed you of the beaches covered in life? Normally, seals that were kicked loose because it's that time for them to be, could just go to the beaches and there's all kinds of nourishment. There are cases that involved older animals too, not just young animals. It is clear that these seals are starving to death. Many seals are emaciated. That's emaciated as it gets. We observed greater mortalities newborn preterm pups, juveniles, and subadults. So they were aborting their babies. Females were birthing pups almost 2 months early, and they did not make it. And a smaller colony, about 158 dead seals in 1 hour, with distressing scenes of aborted fetuses and emaciated seals. So, just unbelievable, soul-wrecking place to be. In addition to the unhealthy seals, we noted several sick and dying seabirds. They're basically dying of starvation, and they're trying to blame it on overfishing. But overfishing don't keep the little tiny fish, right? They can still survive. Everything has to be gone, because these seals can eat snails and mollusks and mussels and scallops and abalones and oysters and clams. Right there. There's a lot of rock prey where the fishermen can never get all the fish that live in the pockets of rock piles, right? All the little caves. So fish would just hang out there. There's all kinds of crabs they can eat, right? There's shrimp, and there's all kinds of other species that they can eat. But obviously there's nothing there. It's all gone, is what the evidence is pointing at. not only for seals, but for other species as well, right? Which backs up my assertions, obviously. Carcass of fourth dead whale shark in 11 months, found in the same area. 4 dead whale sharks, and whale sharks eat phytoplankton, which is the basis of the food chain, the basis of the oxygen chain, basis of the carbon sequestration chain. So when you start seeing whale sharks dying like these filter feeders, then you have to think about phytoplankton. We got 2 stories on phytoplankton coming up. This was the 4th whale shark found dead along the coastline in 11 months, which meant there was about 40 of them died. You're only going to find about 10%, right? And this is significant. Largest confirmed individual had a length of 18 meters, 61 feet. That's a big shark, baby. When I was about 12 years old, I had got a speedboat, a little 12-foot flat bottom, with a brand new 15 Johnson on it. And I went out in the harbor breaking the engine in, because you had to burn a couple tanks of gas, right, to break those engines in. And we lived in a place that still has no automobiles. There's only 65 people living there right now. But anyway, I almost hit 2 of them, whale sharks, and I didn't know at that age what a whale shark was. I just seen shark fins. And so I pulled the motor out and glided over them, and thank goodness I never hurt them. I had a flat bottom boat, right? And then I raced back in, all just total, shark's going to get me. And everybody laughed at me because it's whale sharks. And I'd be proud to see one now. 18 meters. A lone beluga whale spotted 1,500 miles from home. Nobody knows why. Well, maybe I do have the story there. It was a surreal experience. This was, anyway, confirmed to be emaciated. Researchers discover new populations of rare killer whales that prey on large sea mammals. Although they're rarely known to travel to the coast, scientists have discovered a group of outer coast transient whales off the Canadian U.S. west coast. They estimated 155 transient whales between Oregon and California, with 26 spotted around Vancouver Island. Yeah, and I got footage of them. They were attacking a couple of years ago, right, 2018, up in British Columbia by Alaska, where they were, or Bella Bella, halfway down the coastline. There was about 12 of them attacking a gray whale. And it was pretty rough weather. But they hid behind my sailboat when I was coming in from the ocean. I was headed in to get fuel and groceries and do some laundry. Bigs, population of Biggs killer whales, mammal-eating transients, have been known to prey on smaller mammals like harbor seals and porpoises. This new group, though, targeted elephant seals. These are like 3,000 pounders. Oceanic dolphins and gray whale calves. They also found an unknown group of killer whales far out in the Pacific Ocean that feeds on sharks. And they had no idea who they were, apparently. Never seen that group before. And that they found that the outer coast whales used a vocal dialect unique from other transient whales to communicate with other transient groups off the coast of the Pacific Northwest. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the group that I was talking about earlier. Bear that jumped on a car and attack. But a lot of bear attacks this year. Like a lot. Bear jumping on a car, though, that's unusual. Jumped on the car, is still evading park rangers. It was just a weird story, eh? More than 70 birds now. There's thousands and thousands of birds dying off United Kingdom beaches in the last week. More than 70 dead birds found lined up in Scots beaches. We'll get to that story coming up. Somebody picked up 70 birds and lined them up, right? It comes a month after 60 starved, emaciated birds were found dead on a nearby beach. And there were guillemots, razorbills, puffins, and Cassini auklets. I'm currently in Newfoundland. High winds pushing traveling petrels. These are called storm petrels, not traveling petrels. These are storm petrels. And the spot they're talking about is the biggest breeding colony on the planet off this coastline here, where there's 3.3 million breeding pairs each year. I went out 4 times last year. They're nocturnal. I went out 4 times last year with this big Zodiac in the dark. High winds push traveling. Birds are being found far inland as Clarenville, which is hundreds of kilometers away, blowing into what they call blowing into the community. And so now they're trying to blame this event on people's porch lights, because these are nocturnal birds. No, they're starving. I went out 4 times last year, and I went down twice now, and I still couldn't find anybody to talk to get the story. It's quite a drive away from me, right? I've been down twice. Went down the weekend and went down last week. It was bad weather last week. I was in on the trails today too. I might show some footage of that tomorrow night. We haven't got time tonight. October's windy weather is pushing storm petrels further inland than usual. These are storm petrels. They live in the North Atlantic for most of their lives, and they only come ashore to breed. They call them storm petrels because they thrive in storms. You get it? What's going on is they're starving to death. Thousands being rescued in unexpected places. We're having an event down here right now as we speak. According to Rock Wildlife Rescue, combination onshore light pollutions and strong gusts is sending more fledgling storm petrels in areas like St. John's to Clarenville. It's like 300 kilometer difference. Well, Rock Wildlife Rescue, it's okay to interview them, but you should be interviewing other agencies too, not just the one, because this is a major media. Onshore light pollution didn't cause this. The biggest colony has been out there for thousands of years, just at Baccalieu Island. And they've never seen... Now, there is some, don't get me wrong, 6.6 million of these birds, when things were going good, some of them do come ashore. There's no maybes about that. But what we're seeing is a completely different scenario. As well as large numbers in South Dildo. Did you know there's a couple places, communities in Newfoundland named Dildo? Nobody ever believes me. I've taken pictures of it. Only 25% of Maine's puffins were able to raise chicks in 2021 due to warming ocean. Now, the warming ocean is Fukushima radiation pulse and energy. Now, I covered that earlier in the show, but it's Fukushima radiation pulses energy at the speed of light every second. And all the nuclear testing and all the nuclear fuel pools worldwide are doing the same thing, right? So Fukushima radioactive fallout. By the way, we got a poll tonight. I got a poll for everybody tonight. I'll put it up there on the big screen for everybody. Is Fukushima worldwide radioactive fallout an extinction level event? You got 30 votes, and we got 93% of them were willing to look at the documentation and make the proper assessment. Hi everybody. Hope everybody's doing good. At no nuclears. At all colors unite, indeed. Only about 25% of the puffin population off the coast of Maine was able to raise chicks this year. Marking 2021 as one of the worst years for the seabird reproduction in decades. The lower number of chicks is believed to have been caused by warmer ocean temperatures, or Fukushima killing the food chain, which is what we're able to document and prove, right? Due to warm, so they're making the assumption right in the headline, and that's because the Paris Accord was, or the Conference of Parties 26, which is in Glasgow. This is day 3 of it. So this is a perfect video for that, because Fukushima is global warming. Fukushima is climate change. Fukushima is also an extinction event. A steep decline in the herring population caused the NOAA to place new restrictions on the U.S. herring fisheries early in 2021, including rules that take into account the fish role in the ecosystem. They're amazing birds, eh? Incredible. We found a couple of dead ones this year when we were out on the ocean. Live whale stranded at Dongle Beach. The live stranding was reported to the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group at around 9 p.m. So this whale and dolphin group shows up out of nowhere. And there's no universities, no institutions, no government agencies. It's just this one non-profit group. And all the media runs to them. If they find a feather on the side of the road, they all run to this group for some reason. Excuse me, my apologies. The organization sent a stranding volunteer to the scene. A volunteer. No academics, no scientists, not even journalists. Stranding officer. So now you got a group, right, that designates somebody in the group a stranding officer. They're not officers. They can't arrest you. They can't do nothing to you. They can't write your tickets. Nothing. They're not officers. But in order to try to make themselves look legitimate, this is what they're doing with these corporate personhoods. Seems that it had washed up because it was sick. So dead whale beach near Port Oxford, the Oregon State University stranding program. Now you'll see every community, university will have a group like that on the coastlines in North America. And all of these are since Fukushima. And nobody else is allowed there. But in the United Kingdom, they have the Irish whale, juvenile humpback. It was decomposed quite a lot. Seal attack. Horror is seal bites a man swimming in the sea off the British coast. There's a lot of seals washing up on the coast, emaciated. And you got a lot of birds currently, we'll get to that, coming, washing up emaciated. Is understood to be the first attack of its kind in British waters. The first time a seal has ever attacked a human in British waters. Man fleeing 50 aggressive seals rescued from a cliff by Coast Guard. They're showing signs of emaciation. They're not supposed to have any wrinkles whatsoever on top of that. Aggressive seals are not a common occurrence. Quebec hunter airlifted to hospital after being attacked by a 500-pound seal, gray seal. Now, he's been doing it for 45 years. He's never seen an attack like that before. Cape Town men, where all the seals are emaciated, we were talking about earlier, that same area, the seal attacked the men and kept trying to drag them underwater, kept biting at them over and over and over. And this went on for an extended period of time to, I think, like 30 minutes. Man attacked by a seal while swimming as Coast Guard issues warning to bathers. So we're starting to see this increase now of marine mammals attacking humans. The plankton head polewards. Ocean warming. A lot of cliches in this one. Caused by anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. Or caused by Fukushima radiation. So Fukushima fallout is global warming. So there's the ocean is completely covered and the continents are completely covered in radioactive fallout. This has broken the food chain. The most important part of the food chain is the phytoplankton, the plankton. So a glass of water would have 1 billion creatures in it. And 85 to 100 million of them would be the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the basis of the oxygen chain, the basis of the carbon sequestering chain. And they're going to be wiped out because they live near the surface. And so the radiation has to go through the surface to saturate the ocean. Researchers suspect many organisms to head to the pole. Well, first off, these are single two-cell organisms. They're not going to head to the pole. You know why? Because they don't know any. They're not animals. They're phytoplankton. They're basically plant matter. Or they're larvae, right? Or eggs or whatever. But they're not capable of propelling themselves. They're not tuna, right? And just going to swim off into the sunset. It'll take them 100 years to swim to the horizon. So claiming that the plankton are headed polewards is cuckoo land stuff. Plankton, the phytoplankton, are also a food source for zooplankton, which in turn nourishes fish. And storm petrels eat the zooplankton, by the way. And marine creatures up to and including the blue whales. As the climate heats up and ocean temperatures rise, researchers expect to see significant changes in plankton distribution. So they might show up in the other areas, but they didn't move there. They just bloomed there. Radiation in the Pacific Ocean has killed the ocean and killed the phytoplankton. And what they're trying to do with this story, right, was blame it on your tin cans, your pop bottles, and your cardboard. As the climate heats up and the ocean temperature rises, and researchers expect to see significant changes. In collaborations with colleagues from the Swiss Federal Institute for Forest, Snow and Landscape. Yeah, they're real experts in phytoplankton, I bet you. The researchers stimulate the effects of climate change. Well, what about the effects of radioactive fallout? We call it global warming. That's the Xenon-133 distribution. This is 19 days later. This one right there behind me there. That's 19 days. It's a continuous non-stop plume, invisible plume of radiation covering the entire planet and radioactive fallout. And so they claim that if the plankton goes somewhere else, which they can't do because they can drift in the ocean, but that's all they can do. And so that's not, obviously, they're not going to propel themselves. The majority of plankton, phytoplankton, is plant matter. Plant matter, is not, it's not a tuna. So too do the relative proportions of small and large species. So now they're trying to say that, yeah, the phytoplankton are going to go, because they're setting the stage for the near future to say, well, plankton have now all gone to the north, right? And so that's why the whales are starving, that are dependent on the whale sharks and everything else that are dependent upon the phytoplankton. So, which is all species, ultimately, including humans, because that's 50% of the oxygen on the planet. Less oxygen. Well, larger organisms decrease. This is absurd assertions, by the way. If changes occur in the plankton species composition, and size structure. It will have a negative impact on ecological pyramid and thus on fish yields. So, something going out my eye there. Try to stop rubbing it for a minute. In smaller species replace largest ones, this transfer of carbon to the deep ocean will decrease. And however, scientists cannot say exactly how significant these effects will be. With the help of data, other researchers have recently been able to show that smaller copepods have displaced the larger species in the North Atlantic since the 50s due to climate warming. Since the 1950s. In the 1950s, nuclear weapons, they were detonating them everywhere. They were going crazy. The most powerful nuclear detonation ever carried out by the United States, Castle Bravo. Yesterday was the Ivory Mike anniversary. It was like 9 megatons or something. Very close to the size of this bad boy. This one was conducted at Bikini Atoll, Marshall Islands. 15 megatons. It's approximately 1,000 times more powerful, or it's like 1,000 Hiroshima-sized bombs going off at one time. So the radioactive fallout is the same as a nuclear war from that monster idiot machine that they blew up. Idiots to do something like that. That's the same thing as a nuclear war, right? The radioactive fallout is the same as a nuclear war. So you expect to see the decrease of the phytoplankton since all the nuclear testing, and this is what we've seen. And then Russia also done the taser Bomba, 42 miles into the air, 7 times higher than Everest, visible 1,000 kilometers away. This was equal to 3,800 Hiroshima-size, 15 kilotons size bombs going off at the same time. 3,800. So if two countries fire 1,900 Hiroshima nuclear weapons into the one country at the one time, is that not a nuclear war? Is the radioactive fallout? Or is only radioactive fallout when someone declares war? You can trace global warming all the way back to this stuff. So the nuclear testing, for instance, that they done in the United States in the same periods, all the way up into the 90s, by the way. Right, so you had the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. 60 friggin' years of many countries having their own little nuclear wars. So they want to give out radiation exposure compensation for everybody in Nevada, for everybody in Arizona, for everybody in Utah, for everybody in Colorado, and Idaho, Montana, New Mexico, and Guam, because they were poisoned with radioactive fallout. So everybody in Australia should get compensation because of what the United Kingdom done at Maralinga and Montebello. And then everybody in the French Polynesians in Nigeria and Algeria should be compensated for what 200 nuclear weapons the French set off, right? And the list just keeps going for China and Russia and India and Pakistan and Israel. Blah, 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 blah. So think about that Western governors wants to give everybody in the country, in those states, compensation because they were poisoned. Just because you can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or touch it or feel it or pick it up doesn't mean it's not harmful. So plankton hit polewards due to climate warming in the 50s is due to endless nuclear weapons, nuclear wars they had in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. See? I disrespect the people that write this article. It's also reduced sequestration of atmospheric CO2 into the deep sea because the phytoplankton were the biggest sequesters of carbon. Now, carbon doesn't heat the planet up, by the way. Oil, gas, coal, and carbon emissions, like carbon and stuff, don't pulse energy every second. Radiation covers the whole planet, and the visible plume, gas, oil, and coal plumes don't do that. And you have this invisible plume pulsing energy at the speed of light worldwide. That was the story I missed. There it is. Tampering with dead whales in New Zealand. So New Zealand whales you're not allowed to tamper with them. You're not allowed to cut pieces off and blah, 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 blah. The whales' remains have since been reclaimed by the sea. But it's a crime for you to touch the whale, go near the whale. Here in Canada, they don't care. You can go up and party on the whale. Authorities unable to determine why hundreds of black Manatees died off Mackay's coastline. They had starved to death, I think. Yeah, lack of food. And they don't know why they showed up here by the bridge either. They don't normally go there. The birds hitched a ride, they believe, on a fishing boat about 60 kilometers off the coast. It was a very unusual event. One theory is that they were exhausted and landed on the nearest place they could find. They found no contaminants. Didn't see any unusual water quality results. They took swab samples from the feathers of deceased birds, for organic contaminants like pesticides, herbicides, hydrocarbons. No organic contaminants were detected. There was no direct evidence of death due to chemical exposures. They also conducted tests on the dead birds from Bushy Island to see if disease was the reason for the deaths. They tested a variety of diseases, influenza, botulism, different viruses, and all tests came back negative. But what the testing did reveal is that a number of the birds had a lack of food in their digestive system. They had starved to death. Their diet is made up of fish like squid and crustaceans, which they don't dive for. They rely on bigger fish like tuna to push them to the surface. A large number of the birds have heart diseases, lung disorders, and liver damage, which is typical of radioactive fallout. Radiation does that to you, right? To all species. Okay. Bird flu outbreak killed 5 swans, 5 seals, and a fox in a park reaching a pear tree. After the unusual virus jumped to mammals, the UK Wildlife Centre. The outbreak took place at an undisclosed wildlife rehabilitation centre, and thousands of animals were killed last winter to prevent the spread of bird flu. Like if it's from the United Kingdom, I want 1,000 different sources for any of their assertions. They're perpetual lawyers. They're unbelievable lawyers. They're incredibly, just unbelievable scum. Whale probably died of natural causes. By Rebecca, I'm too stupid to tie my own shoelaces. I probably died of natural causes. The whale was slightly underweight. Inspections of the whale did not show any signs of trauma or injuries, and told anyway, it was underweight, and you can look at it, you can see it's emaciated. Researchers say orcas eat well in the salty seas between British Columbia and Washington, right? University of British Columbia scientists say their research debunks the popular belief the resident killer whales swimming in Canadian waters in summer months aren't finding enough salmon to feed on. That's good news. No, we've been arguing this now for many years. They claim that the killer whales in Puget Sound went on a hunger strike because they couldn't find Canuck or their favorite salmon. And so the average killer whale eats 360 plus species of birds and animals, like halibut and octopus and seals and sea lions is normal, right? But they're saying that the ones in Puget Sound won't eat anything, only salmon. And if there's not enough salmon, they'll just let themselves starve to death. They'll go on a hunger strike. This is absurd. We're talking about an animal. If it's hungry, it'll eat something else. That's how that actually works in the real world. So they've been fixated on blaming it on lack of salmon for quite a few years, right? And all the whales are showing up emaciated there. But there was a lot of conjectures, opinions, that the killer whales in British Columbia would bioaccumulate at least 1,000 becquerels a kilogram of their body weight of radiation because there was so much radioactive fallout here on the west coast. BC ocean researchers push to help understand and restore all but extinct sunflower sea stars. All but extinct. Well, I've done the research as I showed you at the beginning tonight, and I showed you some of those expeditions. The sea stars were wiped out by the radiation. They were complete, because sea stars use ocean water like we use blood, and there was so much radiation hitting the coastline and washing back down on the coastlines, which is the nursery for all of their babies. A study released a week from the Ocean Wise says that the decimation of the sunflower sea stars began in 2013, 2 years after Fukushima. So they either are useful idiots or don't know what they're talking about. Right, this starfish melting, we read the studies that they cooked up on this. They still don't have a picture of the pathogen or the virus. No microscopic pictures to be able to have a start point, right? This is incredibly suspect in the technology age we live in. So they have no evidence for their assertions. Now these people are looking to raise money. There's 5.7 billion sunflower sea stars they estimated died since Fukushima. 6 billion sunflowers. And when I was a commercial diver, I used to take sea cucumbers, and I would lift up a couple of the sunflower starfish legs and put the sea cucumber underneath it. And then I'd be working for 6 hours at a time in the same area. And then before I came back up, I would set the sea cucumber free. But what I was trying to get happen was the sea cucumber will excrete its innards so the prey will go after that instead, and then it'll get away. They're fascinating struggles you see down there when you do it day after day. I was out there on the ocean floor 300 days a year in British Columbia. We went back on the research expeditions year after year. All the species are gone. I showed that earlier. It's not just sunflower. Now we did find a few. Each year we found one or two, which is, you should find thousands on a short part of the coastline, see, at low tide. So they're also trying to blame sea urchin explosion decimated kelp forest off the Pacific coast. They're blaming that because the sunstar and other starfish were wiped out, so they're claiming that the sea urchins now have gone bananas, right? But it doesn't work. It doesn't actually work that way, right? They're out. Yeah, sea urchins are algae eaters, But there's supposed to be it's not just bull kelp on the coastline. There's actually supposed to be 700 algae, kelps, 700 different kelps. Kelp weed, kelp cabbage, and bull kelp being the most prolific. I've done the research expeditions. Everything is gone. It's not just the sunstar. Recent findings suggest that distribution of fish is shifting north. So we're starting to see in the last year or so a lot of these, they're setting the stage that the reason no fish is now they're all moved north because of climate change, right? And of course climate change is real, but the fish didn't move north, they were killed off. So rather than acknowledge the pictures I showed you earlier, they're claiming that all the species moved somewhere else, but they're residential species. This is the Neptunium-239 dispersal model from Japan's radioactive fallout. This is global warming. It's pulsing energy every second for millions of years. It's not just Neptunian, it's 1,000 fission products. At the university, discovered a sleeping fish in Akita Prefecture. The sleeping fish. Yeah, in a radioactive wasteland. A phenomenal coral discovery by marine scientists at the Pacific Nuclear Test Site at the Bikini Atolls. Huh. What could that possibly be about? Oh, she won $1 million by going to the Bikini Atoll and saying how she expected to be confronted with a moonscape, and she was diving and she surveyed the area's coral for the first times after years of nuclear devastation, and she said she was shocked and couldn't believe her eyes. There were fish and ammonia, sea anemones. It was everything you would expect to see in a normal, healthy reef ecosystem in a tropical paradise. So she got $1 million for saying that. The reality of it was, what was there is extremely radioactive, and it's not just in that little island. This study here in 2019 shows over 1 million square kilometers of radioactive fallout contaminated a huge swath of the ocean extending over 1 million square kilometers and severely impacted the habitability of the affected atolls. Yes, species can live there, but they're incredibly radioactive. They're not healthy or anything like that. The ocean is the soup of life. It'll reseed anywhere, but they'll die off eventually. There won't be maturity. 10 sperm whales died on the coastline, and Prince William is giving out millions of dollars for people to dive in the Bikini Atolls and say everything is cool. Nothing surprises me anymore. 10 sperm whales die and they were emaciated. They're rarely seen. We're almost certainly looking for food. That's quite the statement. 3 sperm whales stranded on a beach are all now dead. That was another story. I was trying to make a point there, right? Another dead sperm whale washes up. This was January of this year. I didn't see that story, so I poked that in there. That was emaciated. That's crazy, eh? Whale expert. They got lost in an attempt to find their way to the breeding grounds in the Mid-Atlantic. They got lost. Whale expert. But we're seeing this over and over and over, where they quote this so-called whatever species happens to be expert, and they'll say the kookiest thing imaginable. Oh no, they got lost. Did these 10 whales get lost? No, they were all emaciated. Did those 3 whales, sperm whales, get lost in the same areas? No, they were emaciated. So when you say that this one, another sperm whale washes up, another one, then why say that one got lost? Because there's one, and there's the other one. Lost sperm whale stranded may have had brain problems. Lost sperm whale. I showed you. See, lost. The very first word, lost. So were the 10 emaciated sperm whale lost too? You get what's going on here? They're trying to set a narrative, right? They're trying to change a narrative. We've seen this after the Paris Accord in 2015, where everything, you bump your knee, that was caused by climate change. You got a speeding ticket? Yeah, you guessed it, that was climate change. If you were late for work, oh, I'm sorry, boss, it was climate change. Oh, it's okay. Put another hour on your card there, you poor thing. Sperm whale dies after beaching in Britain. You can look at that and you can see that's emaciated. That's actually emaciated. A spokesperson for the British Divers Marine Life Rescue, this non-profit group that nobody else is allowed near the whale, only them, is probably not going to survive due to a lack of food. You know, starving to death. Ambush hunter kept his composure after grizzly mauling. The grizzly was stalking them. They were hunting elk. And it had stalked him for quite a ways, apparently. Camel River whale watching guide was fined $10,000 for getting too close to killer whales. Because like the killer whale lobby, they're savages. They're insane savages. They don't care about any other species. They only care about killer whales. And they got so many laws now, you can't go out on the ocean because if there's one out there, they're going to give you a fine because you're looking at it. You're in the same ocean as that whale. That's a crime in the near future. Approaching threatened killer whales. Polar bears and walruses returned to the Pacific Arctic ice for the first time in 20 years. They got ice up there this year. Wow. Scientists are observing an unusual cooling process in the Pacific Arctic against the backdrop of global warming. This natural phenomenon has allowed polar bears and walruses to resume their normal lifestyle on the ice and to stop wading ashore. There are a few areas with large concentrations of mollusks and worms, the mainstay of the walrus. And walrus have to spend a lot of their energy on making these two-way trips, that is, from breeding ground to feeding areas and back. They would swim hundreds of kilometers for the last couple of decades, is what they're saying. Although there are a lot, they grew thinner and thinner because they spent more energy. Actually, what was going on is they got so much radiation in their body starts consuming itself. It's not able to uptake any nutrition or oxygen because you displace the red blood cells with white blood cells. They were mainly thin and emaciated animals, and their mortality rates also soared. Polar bears used to hunt walruses in the past, but only rarely. Now they started attacking walruses on a regular basis because there's no seals. A web over the highway to protect the insects. A web over the highway to protect the insects. That's not something you're used to. Like, protecting insects is not something we're used to hearing only in the last couple of years. Now, this year, it was really difficult to find insects. We checked hundreds of ponds, and there was some insects, but there was no mass of insects. There was no fish jumping trying to feed on the insects, in other words. This net can also generate renewable electricity and protects the insects. Amazing. In a densely populated country like the Netherlands, the need for solutions to safeguard biodiversity is high, particularly protecting insects is one of the priorities. Protecting insects is one of their priorities because they're seeing a massive decline of insects. But we're seeing that symmetrically right around the planet. The insect apocalypse is more nuanced than it first appears. The decline of insects in various parts of the world have sparked warnings of ecological Armageddon as a pillar of the food web crumbles. What was crazy was going across the province this year and last year and not finding any spiders in the forest anywhere. We found 3 webs, deformed webs. 2 was over a little stream, and they were abandoned. And the other one was on rocks, boulders. It was a small web, but it was a spider's web. Out of the summer, that's all we found. And ran into a researcher from Halifax. They told me there was no spiders in Halifax forest either. Dead birds of mysteries in New Zealand. Birds have been dropping out of the sky this week and no one seems to know why. Monday she witnessed 12 birds in the space of 25 minutes plopping down on the pavement. And wondering why they were acting strangely, she asked if anyone else had seen something similar, saying the birds have literally landed on the road pavement frothing at the mouth. And so they talk about a chemical that they use to spray, and it puts the birds to sleep. And so they euthanize the birds they're targeting, and let's put the other ones in a dark box, and they recover in New Zealand. This is how they do pest control. They release massive amounts of chemicals. Lunatics, eh? "5G, vaccines, COVID, spy robots, poison 1080, and that's the end is near," others have speculated. So revolting media to suggest to mock like that, isn't it? Where's that story to? Climate change algae in the frame of dead guillemots mystery spreads to Europe. Experts remain in the dark over why thousands of guillemots are dying in Scotland, with dead seabirds now found in the Netherlands and Norway. But they're all emaciated. Thousands of guillemots discovered either dead or starving. Starving. One woman found 23 dead birds at the one time, and now the problem spread to mainland Europe. Expects it might be climate change. They had to put it in there, they don't get a paycheck, right? He's a seabird scientist with UK Centre for Ecology. He's a seabird scientist and climate change. Well, you got to get funding next year, right? Experts don't fully understand yet, but they have all but ruled out natural causes. Why are so many guillemots being found dead in Scotland? He said it wasn't normal, higher than normal. There is no normal pre-Fukushima. It's only post-Fukushima. If you've been looking at it for the last 6 or 7 years, it might seem normal to you. But if you go pre-Fukushima nuclear meltdowns, you didn't see it happening anywhere. Something caused them to come closer to the coastline. Then this in turn led to more people coming across the bodies and creating a false impression. Well, if you're finding thousands on your coastline, you're basically only finding 10%. However, given the sustained nature of the episode and the latest find in Norway and Netherlands, he stepped back from that view. It tells us something more up towards is going on. Wow, thanks for the clarification. It's not just a natural die-off. We're confident of that now, said scumbag, bootlicking, cheerleading lapdog. Similar instances like this have because of weather events like storm, but we don't think it's that. Maybe it's cows' farts, eh? Did you think about that, you scumbag? The weather has been fairly settled this year. There's not storms, so why'd you bring it up for? You despicable sack of shit, you. He describes the amount of guillemots found in Netherlands and Norway as record numbers. Why are you talking to that person? For God's sakes, don't ever interview that despicable sack of shit again. Don't ever do that again. In 2019, an estimate 20,000 guillemots were found dead or dying in the Netherlands. We covered that event, right? We do a lot of these shows. Unfortunately, they took down my main site with 1,600 of these videos. 2 months ago, with no emails, no strikes in my account, while I was on a research expedition counting birds and insects, 450 kilometers in the woods. Unbelievable. It's been a tough year, eh? What a scumbag that guy was, though, eh? He was a bird scientist. Could climate change be to blame? I'm going to vomit if I hear it one more time tonight, I swear. Hundreds of dead young tree swallows raise concern in southeastern BC. So what's going on there is they got bird boxes, and they're finding all the dead young ones in the bird boxes, and they're emaciated. A number of the boxes closer to the coast contain dead young birds. He checked 257 boxes and found dead young birds in 67 of them. He said, I've never seen it before. He's been doing it for years and years, right? I've never seen this before. What's weird is last year at 250, I didn't have any dead young. 250 boxes last year, no dead. This year, multiple dead. Now, these birds are insect feeders. The only thing I can pinpoint is a possible cause is starvation. Tree swallows eat insects, using their phenomenal agility and reflexes to catch the bugs in midair. And they're so quick, scientists have reported seeing swallows catching raindrops to drink. And so this was what, this year, like on a long, say a 50-kilometer run, I might be lucky to see 6 birds. Most of these were robins, which are migratory, by the way, right? Despite the fact we got 380 plus residential species here, anything that might cause flying insects to stay on the ground. They're quick, scientists reported. So, anything that might cause insects to stay on the ground. What a strange statement. Flying insects to stay on the ground. So they're saying basically the insects are there, but they're not flying. The people who wrote the story, not the people they were interviewing. Could affect how much the birds can catch for their hungry brews. Look, if the birds got brutally sharp eyesight because they're catching raindrops out of the falling out of the sky to drink, they're not so stupid that they can't go down on the ground and pick up the insects that don't fly. Like saying that anything that might cause flying insects to stay on the ground could affect how much the birds can catch for their hungry brews. That person shouldn't even be allowed to drive a car again. That person shouldn't even be allowed to drive a bicycle because obviously they have no capacity for rationale. I never read anything so stupid in my life. But we're seeing this constantly. The people they interview are literally, they're not stupid, they're scumbags. Their job is to lead people away, right? Amazing looking birds, isn't it? I want to go to bingo now. The deaths of hundreds of young tree swallows in nesting boxes around New Brunswick. So it's not just 50 or 60, it's hundreds. A long stretch of bad weather at the wrong time could be deadly. Like, the birds don't live in tropical paradises. Particularly if they're in Canada, they're used to adverse conditions. People in the area seen fewer insects this summer than in past seasons. Over 10,500 cormorants were killed by avian flu outbreak in Western Capes. It's the same spot where all the seals are emaciated. And it's not just cormorants. And they show you pictures of penguins for some reasons, when there's actually cormorants. And, of course, we're talking about Africa. They're a very impoverished country. And the public relation firms have taken over everything there. And they're not from Africa. There's actually 12,500 as of yesterday. They're in the same spot as all the whales that are seals that are emaciated. That whale is emaciated. He's unbelievably skinny. This was described as a baby humpback whale, but he's unbelievably skinny. It's alive, but barely. The Namibian Dolphin Project. Again, we're seeing this, these new groups that the media doesn't contact universities typically, or institutions or government agencies. They contact these groups. And these groups are just people that started, at a compassion rescue because they've seen all these dead animals. They don't understand the big picture. They say the incidences of whales stranding along the coast is not uncommon. Before the latest incident, an 8-meter juvenile male was beached, which had seemingly starved to death. It had starved to death. He says starvation is the most common cause of strandings. There was no starving whales pre-Fukushima nuclear meltdown anywhere on the planet. There was no emaciated birds, flocks of birds anywhere on the planet. Now it's everywhere all the time. Is that a coincidence? There's another phytoplankton. Tiny ocean creatures with a global impact. Again, they're talking about the species as if they're mobile species. These are the very tiny plant matter and everything else. Climate change. Because they don't get paid if they don't say climate change 50 times in each article. Heats to sea and plankton are on the move. Plankton are not on the move. They're not like, they're not migratory animals, okay? They're not just going to pick up and go because these kinds of assertions are kooky stuff. This is fruitcake voodoo nonsense. As ocean currents change, smaller warm water plankton are also replacing more nutritious cold water ones. So they're saying the ones that we're finding are less nutrition in a mass than the normal ones they expected to find. So they're finding a different species than they normally expect. Meaning the species that feed on them need to adapt or move too. So they keep doing this. We see this every single show where they suggest where they suggest that the species will just move away. But see, what they can't prove is that it moved away. They make these suggestions that it moves away, but then that's where it stops. They don't say it moved here, and there's all kinds of whales, and they're looking great, and there's all kinds of seals, and they're feeding on them, and there's all kinds of birds partying there. No, that's because that's not how it friggin' works. Moment the polar bear hunts and kills a reindeer is captured. Actually, it's very unusual, but hunted down a reindeer. Hunted down a reindeer. He dragged it out of the ocean. He drowned it and dragged it out of the ocean. But then you got over 3,000 emaciated polar bears in the Arctic. Nasty, eh? Garbage. Official moment details about a bird die-off in Wasaga Beach in Canada. Locals reported hundreds of birds found dead on the beach. Non-profit arranging a rescue attempts. I thought that was birds up there. It's not. That's jet fighters. The problem's confirmed with bird die-off. They won't give any documentation there on it whatsoever. And fish are dying too. No comment. To the Avernus of Guelph. Everything lines up with botulism. And we've heard this over the years, and then you might get a report back in 2 years' time. You won't get it less, but maybe 2 years' time before they'll actually release it. And they'll say, well, we didn't find botulism. Take care. But they'll say it's just an opinion. That's strictly an opinion. And I disrespect them for it. Rare white deer spotted in Buffalo. Common insecticide linked to extreme decline in freshwater insects. Right? So most people, you read the headlines and they move on, right? I don't care about that. They just read it anyway, right? But later on, their friends will be saying, we're into the pond today, and there wasn't many insects. Yeah, because, insecticides. Well, I was 450 kilometers away in the woods. There's no insecticides, and there's no species there. It's called Fukushima radioactive fallout. It covered the planet. It's still doing it. It's a continuous plume. It's a continuous plume covering the planet. So that's over there is the Pacific Ocean. Right here is the Atlantic Ocean. This is Europe. The whole planet covered, and the date on that is the 26th of March. That's 2 weeks after. 2 weeks and 1 day. So 15 days after the nuclear meltdown, radiation, continuous, non-stop, persistent plume. An invisible snowstorm covering the entire planet at the one time. You would recognize that. That was weird. We had the whole planet had a snowstorm at one time. You probably say something then, right? You're not going to acknowledge when radiation does it. That's just bigot, man. That's racist. You're prejudiced against radiation. So yeah, you got all these houses and everybody using bug spray. But I went out in the forest and the species are gone. Not maybe, not almost, but they're gone. Common insecticide linked to extreme decline in fresh water. Spiders are largely beneficial and help keep insects under control. And they're missing. Large-scale bee death sparks fear over insect health. That was a strange story. The bees were in a straight line. All the dead bees. Because you know what bees will do? They'll go back to the nest and they'll fly a straight line to where the honey is to. And they'll tell the other ones, fly on 26 degrees, and you'll run right into the nest right where there's a wiggle toe. Almost every foot they were finding a bee, but it was all in a straight line. It was probably pesticides or something, that one. Another insect discovered in the Van Gogh painting. Well, it wasn't an insect. It was tracks. It's where an insect walked on fresh paint in the Van Gogh painting. Left tracks behind. $90 million painting. Garden spiders are missing this fall. That was Oregon. The spiders are missing. I never found last year or this year a single spider web like that with a spider in it, let alone a spider web like that. A beautiful symmetrical spider web. I haven't got a single picture like that in 10 years, by the way. Beach whale discovered in South Iceland. Iceland, that's emaciated, by the way, look at that. The whale in question is a fin whale. They had made a mistake. There's 59 polar whales and 7 sperm whales. Last year, 41 whales beached. In 29 separate incidences. 2019, 153 whales and 31 incidences. And so whales can beach in Iceland for a variety of reasons. Some are mysterious and others result of collisions with ships. So since 2015, we've seen that narrative spike. And there's less ships on the ocean each year. Now they're emaciated whales. They starved to death. Locals on jet ski in Iceland scared away 100 whales last year. Iceland had... I missed it. I never got that for some reason. This year there was 40 incidences of whales beaching in Iceland or something. And Iceland's not that big of a country. Why we're seeing dead whales? Like the whales online, the country whales, the media down there are just really something. Thank goodness they don't come here and write the journalism. There's been an increase in reports of dead seals and pups being found. Dead seals and pups. In the same place where, like in the last couple of years in the United Kingdom, was the last year or the year before, there was 1,000 culvert beak whales washed up. Well, there was 100 washed up in different stages of decomposition, which meant there was at least 1,000, but total in the last few years was around 50,000 whales, porpoises, and seals that are washed up in the coastlines, including factors like weather and not being able to feed. Whenever I hear media, and just only last year we've seen that phenomenon where they're blaming the weather, it's usually United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand will do it. All influenced by Britain, obviously. And it's despicable that anybody would claim that the reason we're seeing an increase of die-offs is because of bad weather. That's why they're washing up. It's a garbage can diagnosis, right? Stormy weather can often wash pups off the beaches. So you mean the pups don't know how to move up the beaches out of the way? The reason they exist in the first place is because of genetic superior selection. They have an instinct not to stay there. But that is their environment. That's their environment. They're perfectly adapted to that. They just swim back in and climb up on the beach. That's what they do. That's their genetic makeup. The sun shines. The rain falls and seals are natural in the ocean. It's hard to say whether more seals are dying or whether it's just more seals are washing up on beaches. Probably one of the stupidest things I've heard in the last couple of weeks. Lizzie Hobble, a spokesperson for the Grover Seal Project. For God's sakes, get rid of her. Get rid of it, get rid of it, and get rid of it now. Are the brine shrimp gone? That's a good question. I'll have to look that up. Over 10,000 endangered seabirds killed by... we already covered that one. We don't know. They don't know 100% whether it's the flu. Puffins baffled by thousands of seal deaths. Thousands. We don't know. We haven't got a firm number yet, which is unusual. Scientists are probing rising deaths of Cape fur seals. There's thousands of them that are emaciated. There's 5,000 washed up last year in Namibia. And we covered that, right? And a lot of them were having aborting their fetuses before they come to maturity. The endangered bird population, that's the common murre. Or that's a cormorant. There's at least 12,000 cormorants so far, which is most likely underreported. That's the same spot as thousands of emaciated, and the cormorants are emaciated too, by the way. Large number of Cape fur seals die off along the west coast. They're emaciated, but it was in the thousands, which, who knows, right? We're well over 2,000, probably 6,000 or 7,000 by the sounds of it. So far, no direct link to this occurrence, avian flu outbreak. And mortalities have increased. So this is not just pups, though. This is yearlings and adults. Researchers' scientific instinct argued that something else was going on. They're seeing above normal levels of mortality across the age ranges. So all the way up to adults. Spiders are much smarter than you think. That's a story worth reading, where they gave controlled environment and put prey in a certain area, and spiders had to figure out a route to get there. And they also done experiments where, so jumping spiders, they don't build nests, they forereach further to species. They eat other spiders too, right? But that was a really cool, the experiments they done. These spiders were actually shown intelligence. Now, all spiders in the forest have disappeared for the last couple of years in the research expeditions I've been carrying out. Florida manatees are dying off in record numbers. They're starving to death, emaciated. And almost 1,000 of them died. This is unprecedented numbers. Humanity's latest victims amid food scarcity is Florida manatees dying in record numbers. Must Montana wolves die? So they're killing off the wolves because you say there's too many wolves. They estimate 800 to 1,270 gray wolves are going to be hunted. Do you want to get it down to about 200 wolves are left? But the argument was there's an incredible amount of moose, elk down there too. New England moose are losing the fight against winter ticks. And so normally the moose got these little birds will land on them and eat the ticks, but they seem to have disappeared. And so now the moose are being found emaciated and moose like eating the shoots, the very tips of young plants. And radiation gravitates to the top of plants, the biggest concentrations. Like pine needles where you would make a tea for drinking. Japan doesn't do that anymore because they're so radioactive. It's murder by tea, right? Teeny tiny ticks. But normally there's little birds will land on the moose, right? And eat those little ticks. Sea urchin salmon die en masse in Japan. And this is over a very big area. in Hokkaido, of course, which is the biggest island, where they had a massive earthquake a couple of years back. Was a 9 point something, where it had multiple landslides on entire mountains and the ranges of mountains, all landslides on all sides of it. They called it a 6.2 on Japan's scale of 7, which meant it was a 9 point something earthquake on land, and it wasn't too far from a nuclear plant in that part of the country. They're blaming it on red tides, etc., etc., etc. Again, it's hard to quantify these assertions when they're perpetual liars. So a lot of farm stuff they're talking about. A poke in the eye saved a surfer's life in a great white shark attack. Hey, why not, right? Of course, why we're seeing dead seals wash up in Welch's Beach, why we're seeing. You always see that with the British. And then they'll interview some scumbag. There's a range of reasons we're seeing more seals and pups like this, including factors like weather. Again, blaming the weather, right? Which is a garbage can diagnosis. Thousands of dead sea creatures found waist deep, like 4 feet deep. Okay, 3 feet deep in piles on the English beaches. That's absurd. Waist deep. Imagine that's 3 feet deep of sea creatures, crabs and shellfish and lobsters and everything else. Which is on that side. On the other side is Sellafield. Nuclear meltdown, been hemorrhaging in the ocean for 60 years there. That whole island is covered in radioactive fallout on top of that. Thousands of thin Cape fur seals have died. Thousands have died. All of these are very poor looking health-wise. So big polluter, one massive container ship equals 50 million cars. One of these ships is 50 million cars. 15 of the biggest ones are equal to all the cars on the planet. So there's 96,000 ships on the ocean at any given time. That's equal to 42 trillion people on the planet every day. Where the pollution from 96,000 of these big ships. The elephant in the room is Fukushima radiation when it comes to the Pacific Ocean die-offs. This Enrico Fermi is in there somewhere. This is the people that came up with the first reactor. One day there will be a tour where you'll go around to all their graves and piss on them. And UC Berkeley, I got a folder. I got to do the video again because they took it off my other site. Of Berkeley downplaying Fukushima with incredible, cowardly, degenerate lies. Absurd amount of lies, yeah? A hideous, unimaginable, despicable amount of lies. Oh, well, it's a tough show to do because there's so much work to put it all together. And then you got to run through it in 2 hours or less, preferably less. And we're hour and 50 minutes, so. Stable, Ann Mansfield, James Lucid, John 2H, Dana Nasana, James Oldhand. Wow, we got lots of people there tonight. There, Rad Loft. Good night, everybody. Anna C3. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to vote. Is Fukushima a worldwide radioactive fallout and extinction level event? We got 48 votes with a 96% resounding yes. We're going to end that poll when I finish. Shout out to everybody. Colette S. Hi, Colette. Hope you're doing well. Good night, everybody. Barks and Meows. Johnson. Adrian Johnson. Mutant Botanical Garden. These are such difficult shows to do. Andrew B, which is CFINSTR. Hi, Andrew. Dennis Jerkins. You would say something, but you cannot speak Canadian. My God. On a video like this, really? You're not the one doing all the work, obviously. Dana Nasana said he just drove by Mono Lake yesterday. No bugs. Wow. Blue sky. Apologies if I missed anybody. Shane Clark. Thinker. Is that I seen Christopher Lieber, Dave Hawley, UK. Yeah, good night, everybody. Pelicans are way down too, Blue Sky says. American ibis population down to a tenth. Tree fruit. See, I knew I missed somebody there. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night for day 4 of Conference of Parties 26. We're going all weekend until the 12th of November. I'm not looking forward to that at all. It's a lot of work. It's an absurd amount of work doing these shows 5 days a week. But to go all the way up until the 12th of November because of the Conference of Parties, COP26, it's going to suck. Okay, so I'm going to close down the poll. We got 96%, 49 votes. 96% says yes. The Fukushima worldwide radioactive fallout's a extinction level event. We'll close that down. We thank everybody. Hey, Boston. Hugs for everybody. Good night, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Find the time, the energy, the effort, and the will to see this through. It's an absurd story. It's an absurd implications. This is not a game. This is an extinction event. Good night, everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. God bless.